Hi, welcome to the Your Voice Here podcast. This podcast is all about taking a fun and inspiring look at people's journeys into podcasting, radio presenting, or whatever they're looking to use their voice for to be heard. My name is Jeremy Chapman, and I'm the host of this podcast. Joining me on today's episode are Ed Crocker and Julia Boggio from Two Lit Chicks podcast.
Welcome to Two Lit Chicks, where Julia Boggio
and Edward Crocker
talk to writers about the books that changed their lives.
Ed and Julia are both writers, and with Julia's book Shooters available now, check out the show notes for more details. On each episode of Two Lit Chicks, Ed and Julia are joined by a writer who speaks about the stories that changed their lives. It's a lot like Desert Island Discs, but for books. On this episode, Ed and Julia are going to chat all about their journey into podcasting, and it gives a rather insightful look into how you do get into podcasting, along with the time involved. I should just point out this was recorded back in December 2022, so the C word is mentioned a couple of times, and also there is a little bit of profanity. I'm joined now by Ed and Julia from Two Lit Chicks podcast. Ed, Julia, how are you doing today?
Yeah, doing great.
I'm very cold.
I've got a hot water bottle, so, you know.
It's just winter, isn't it? Inevitable.
It is inevitable. We can't put it off. We've just got to keep warm. I'm finding family games of Twister really helps. Keep me warm in my house. But thank you so much for joining me on the Your Voice Here podcast. I've brought you here today to talk about your journey in podcasting and Two Lit Chicks. So, could you tell me and all the listeners all about Two Lit Chicks podcast?
Well, Two Lit Chicks started out as a book podcast, and what we do is we talk to well-known writers about the books that changed their lives. So it's sort of like Desert Island Discs, but for books. It started out because me and another friend, Jen, were waiting to hear back from publishers about whether they were going to take our books. And we wanted to do something to build our brands in the meantime. So we thought podcasting seemed like a really good way to do that.
Yeah, and I'm a sort of Johnny come lately. Jen had to sadly depart the Two Lit Chicks podcast. I mean, she's not dead. Sadly depart sounds like she's dead. She's still alive. And Julia very kindly asked me if I wanted to replace her. So I joined in the last couple of episodes of this season, and I'm looking forward to the next season.
And we decided the fact that he wasn't a chick should not stand in the way of progress. So
yes, yeah, it's a subtitle One Lit Chicken Ed. But yeah.
Yeah.
Well, who says that a chick has to be a woman? Thinking about it.
Exactly. I'm going with you on that.
So I just think, I think we need to break those misogynistic shackles and just go, no, it's fine. Two Lit Chicks can still be just, it's gender neutral, isn't it?
Exactly.
There we
go.
There we go.
There you go. Very, very modern of you, Jeremy. Very modern.
I thank you. I thank you. Now, you said about your, you start off with Jen, and then we have Ed here. What sort of discussions, what sort of planning, the start of that journey of podcasting, Julia? Could you tell me a little bit more about how did it come about from a sort of a master plan between you and Jen to now having a podcast that's been listened to around the world and downloaded thousands of times everywhere?
Well, it started out, we had planned a writer's weekend with some other writer friends of ours up at Jen's flat in Edinburgh. And one by one, they all dropped out. So it was just Jen and me. And literally it was like, shall we start a podcast? Yes, let's. And then we just started going. I asked for recommendations for a producer, and my friend Melissa Love recommended you. And
Thank you,
then
Melissa.
we were, yeah. She's great for recommendations. Yeah, that was sort of the beginning. You really helped to you helped us not make a lot of mistakes in the beginning, I think, and so that was very helpful. And yeah, I think the plan was just to get going and get some writers buying into it who would let us interview them, and we did amazingly well. I mean, in our first season, we had Bonnie Garmis. She was voted the Waterstones Author of the Year. So we've had some amazing guests. Joanne Harris, who wrote Chocolat, Kit Duvall, great people. I think with the podcast, you have to go into it realistically. You can't expect that it's going to fulfill all your objectives from the beginning.
Sure. Yeah.
You've got to understand that it's not going to happen in one episode. It's not even going to happen in 5. You've got to keep at it, slowly grow your audience organically. And we're 2 seasons in now. And I feel like we're only just starting to realize the purpose of why we started the podcast.
Yeah.
And as to your question about planning, yes, I wrote an entire marketing plan because that's just who I am. I've got a degree in marketing. It's what I do.
But I think it's sensible to have a plan. It's sensible to break down that workload because there is an awful lot involved when you first start a podcast. And there's everything from trying to first of all set out the theme of a podcast, whether you're going to do interviews, whether it's just going to be a discussion, then setting up, well, what equipment do we need? And then it's like going through locks on a canal. Just as you get through one, you've then got to get through another one before you can get to the next stage. You've just got to gradually go through those gates to sort of get there, to then make sure that the podcast gets started, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And it can be very tough because it can be overwhelming. And you just said you're in your 2nd season now, which is incredible. Because there are so many podcasts that start and they barely get to their 2nd episode because suddenly they get overwhelmed by the workload and everything involved that they go, oh, I can't do this. And I think that's always another tip I always pass on to people is just, appreciate how much time is involved first. Don't cut corners.
It's definitely, I think that's great advice, because it does take a lot of time. And I think, when we started the podcast, we had each guest choose 5 books that changed their lives. And then we would read those books and read a book of the author who we were interviewing and then learn about the writers of the books that they chose. And it was literally like doing, an MA in literature. And, so for season 3, which we'll start in January, we've cut down the books to 3 just because you have to be realistic. You have to, you can't let the podcast take over your life because you still have to have balance. And, Ed and I, we still need to write books because that's what we do. And it was hard to do that when the workload was so high, but yes, but that's a great thing about being the boss of your podcast is you can change it.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that I've only had to do for 1 episode this 5-book reading demands. So I'm very happy about the new 3-book limit. But I should also say, you mentioned Julia mentioned about all the planning that goes into it. I mean, I was already aware of this podcast because I've known Julia and Jen through the Curtis Brown creative writing course that we did a couple of years ago. And so when I heard that she was setting this podcast, I knew that it would be, a success. I knew it would carry on for a year or so because Julia's just, if you've ever met Julia, you'll know this. Julia's just very, she's very ambitious. She's just very kind of on it. She's not going to do things half-heartedly. And Jen's the same as well. So obviously podcasts don't have a great track record of surviving, like you said, after a couple of years. But I just knew this was going to work. I was just like, this is going to work. And that's proven to be the case.
Oh, thanks, Ed.
Yeah, that absolutely proved to be the case.
That's my Christmas spirit coming through there. Ho, ho, ho. That's an in-joke to the Christmas special too.
Yeah. You have to go back and listen to it, everybody.
All the links will be in the show notes, of course.
Okay.
But I think it's staying at it. Consistency is key with podcasting of making sure that you've got an episode out. You have a theme that you stick to or some sort of structure that you stick to. And I think the guests you've had on have been absolutely incredible, really have. And sometimes there'll just be a name. You'll send me and say, could you contact these people? Or, send them the guest information. And then I'll look at them and go, oh my God, they're like, you've got people who've worked on The Thick of It, and you've got people that all these kind of huge people and this is the thing I've found with authors is that it's such a weird thing. It's like TV chefs. I think authors and TV chefs are rock stars because they've actually got a skill set that they should be put on a pedestal and shouted about rather than reality TV stars who have zero talent.
Yeah, here, I'll go with that. Well, you'll be very excited in season 3 because we've got Robert Kamen coming on, who wrote the Karate Kid series and Taken and
Fifth Element.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! I mean, it really does just blow me away because Hollywood is such a billion-dollar industry. People always just remember the films, but what they don't realise is the majority of these great films have come from books. So again, it's more recognition for authors. That's why I think your podcast is fantastic because Joanne Harris you had on. And I came in and I said to Meredith, "Oh, we've got Joanne, my wife Meredith, we've got Joanne Harris coming on." And her first word was, "Oh, fuck off, you haven't really." Like, she couldn't get over it. Like, it was just like, it's huge. And I think you do such a wonderful job with the guests, and every guest that has been on has just enjoyed themselves. They've had a lovely chat, and I think they've come away thinking that was a wonderful hour I've just had with two wonderful people. So it's it has got such a lovely theme to it with the podcast. I'm waffling there. I'm so sorry.
No, you can say nice things about our podcast all day long. I'm not going to cut you off.
I think someone needs to start saying negative things. Too nice.
Now, you say about we touched on planning and everything like that, and starting off slowly. And I think that, again, is great advice when people start off a podcast. Is, as with anything in life, the start and the end are always going to be there. The great part is the journey, everything in between. So you shouldn't rush the journey. And I think with a podcast, you've got to understand it's slow progress. And sometimes that progress can be even slower than normal. Sometimes it can speed up a little bit and then it slows down again. But it is slow progress. But I think it's always recognizing that progress and just keep going at it, because podcasting and radio is so different. It's such a different medium, despite it being a very similar thing. And with a podcast, it's out there. Once you've recorded it and put it out, it's out there forever, as long as you keep up hosting fees and all those sorts of things. So it's there. So potentially 2 years down the line, someone might hear that episode and then suddenly it becomes a phenomenal hit. You just don't know when it's going to click, really.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about podcasting is that it's evergreen.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's fabulous, because I keep an eye on stats and download figures and everything like that, and I'm always looking across all the podcasts I do, and suddenly I'll think, well, that podcast hasn't had an episode out for about 6 months, and suddenly I've just seen its downloads just have a trickle through, and then another trickle through, and you think, what happened there? And it's just people switching onto it. Maybe they've searched for something, maybe there's been a guest on that we spoke about something a few years ago that suddenly is very much in the
we had a bump on Sunday, and I was like, oh, something's happened there, and then I found out that we'd been listed in a best of newsletter from a big writing group. So you never know who's helping you with your promotion.
no and you were on the Great British Podcasts as well, weren't you?
Yeah, they put us in their newsletter.
So you've had all sorts of write-ups, and that is the thing. People always come to me and say, I want to monetize my podcast. How can I make money from my podcast? And I always say, you can monetize every aspect of your life if you want to, but how fun will your life then become? And with a podcast, if you look at little bits of recognition, like you say, you've been featured in a couple of newsletters, you've had great guests on, you can say, I've got a podcast, because there's others out there whose podcast is literally just still on a notepad. They've never even recorded it. So I think it's identifying where the little success stories are in the podcasting journey, and then gradually things will monetize. But
also deciding how you want to monetize it, because it's not monetizing. It isn't necessarily getting sponsors and that kind of stuff. That's one way to monetize your podcast. But another way is to use it as a tool to sell other things. So like for Ed and me, it's definitely a tool for getting people aware of our books and pointing them towards buying those. So, I have some other friends who had a podcast called Shoot, Edit, Chat, Repeat. And it was a huge photography podcast. They had like 5,000 downloads per episode, and they've just finished because they did 100 episodes. And what they were selling were classes. So they were selling online courses and stuff like that. So that was how they monetized. I mean, they did have sponsors as well, but their big monetization was through getting people interested in the classes that they were offering. So there's loads of different ways to make a podcast work for you.
Absolutely. The main way people always think is, like, say, sponsorship or advertising, and at the end of the day, that can then have an adverse effect on your listenership, because listeners might go, another advert, can't be bothered. They've ruined a podcast. There are a couple of podcasts I don't listen to anymore because they have become overly they're sort of bulging with adverts. Basically, I find it a struggle with it. So I agree, looking at it in a different way,
Yeah, but that being said, if anyone does want to sponsor us, we're totally open to that.
Well, absolutely, absolutely.
Always.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, no company too unethical. That's not true.
That's definitely not true.
But no, just to sort of follow up on that, I find it really interesting how I'm going to take a complete guess at when the first podcast was made. I don't know, 2000. That's correct.
It was something like that. It was 2005, 2004, something like that. I can't remember.
Okay,
Yeah.
so in that ballpark. But I guess that's one of the key reasons, the key ways in which podcasts have changed. Because when podcasts first came out, it was like you had someone who did something else. Maybe they were a writer or an actor or whatever. They had a podcast and then they would maybe get sponsorship for that. Whereas now we live in this age where you have sort of creatives who are essentially, for various reasons, the proliferation of digital stuff, the sort of collapse of big institutions, for various reasons, they have to have a lot of pots sort of spinning, if that's the right metaphor, not really sure. Plate spinning, thank you. Excellent.
Plate spinning.
Yes,
Plate spinning,
yes. Excellent. Pot spinning, that's,
they could be spinning pots as well. Why not?
Well, exactly, yeah. Why just plates? You can spin whatever you want. Yeah. Spin classes. So people have all these plates and pots spinning, and they can do that through the podcast. So they can have obviously traditional advertising sponsorship, or like writers have maybe Substack now, or they have other ways they get sort of monetization. So we live in this sort of diverse world where everyone's doing about 10 things at once, and so podcasts are now this opportunity to have all this different range of kind of money or attention coming in. So I think the environment has completely changed, and I think we're entering this sort of weird kind of futuristic phase where anything's possible.
And the interesting thing as well is podcasts are definitely part of my marketing plan for my own book. So I mean, long story, but I ended up independently publishing my first book, Shooters, which is available in March, so go buy it now.
I've got my copy on pre-order.
Pre-ordered?
Yay, thank you. But as an independent author, it's very hard to get places like, women's magazines and whatnot to give you the time of day, because of course they're all mostly in the pockets of traditional publishing. Yeah. So podcasting, I have found, is my way of getting my message out there. I mean, I think I'm already going to be a guest on like 7 podcasts, including this one. Brilliant. To get the word out about my book. And I mean, it's a completely new, modern, viable way of marketing yourself.
Absolutely, because it's not just getting on your podcast, getting on others. Every bit of exposure is good. And
I think because we have our own podcast, it makes people like Ed and me, a more attractive guest, because of course we've got all the equipment. That our sound isn't going to be shit, which is a big issue. Sound is always the big issue, which is why we have you.
I like to help. I mean, with podcast guesting, there are companies out there that offer a service where you can pay them and they will get you onto other podcasts and guesting on other podcasts. Would you say that's good value? Is it a good idea? What's your views on that? I'm always fascinated by this podcast guesting business model.
To be honest, I think that it depends on how comfortable you are with promoting yourself.
Sure.
I have absolutely no problem with it. You hear my American accent, where Americans are born, knowing how to promote themselves.
Absolutely. And they're so good at championing people as well. That's what I love with Americans.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I have no problem just contacting people out of the blue and pitching them. I mean, I've got a good backstory as well, because my husband and I were original YouTube stars, because our wedding dance went viral in 2007. We ended up on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and I danced with Patrick Swayze, and so I've got a good hook.
I get a little flutter every time you say about Patrick Swayze. I'm a straight man, but Patrick Swayze for me was just the ultimate man for me.
He was on those muscles in his arms.
Sorry, Ed. We're just having a moment.
No.
Back to where you were, Julia. Sorry.
Nobody puts Jeremy in a corner.
I carried a watermelon.
But yeah, I used to have a blog called "I Carried a Watermelon" about having my baby. It was really popular
amazing.
for a while. Yeah.
Brilliant.
But anyway, so you have to come up with a good press release. You have to have a good hook. Why are these people going to want to have you on their podcast? Because you have to sell yourself.
I think there's a sort of defined dividing line between kind of promotion and then keeping your brand so it doesn't seem desperate. So I completely agree with Julia. You know, whether you're an indie author or whether someone needs to promote yourself, like, you got to promote yourself, and you should never apologize. Like, there'll always be people who will think, oh, you know, God, so this person's promoting themselves again. But you have to, unless you have like a big marketing arm of, you know, a big publisher or some kind of corporation behind you, you have to do it, and you won't be successful if you don't. And you should never apologize for trying to show people that you have an awesome product. Like, that's how you get successful in this you know, you can complain about capitalist society, but until you change it, that is what you have to do, and you should never apologize for trying to be successful. That said, and I mean, Julia's a great example of someone who I think is doing this right. But there are people I've seen who, in understandable desperation to promote themselves, will do things like this. You know, there's some dodgy PR people out there, if you're an indie author, who will basically pay people for reviews. So, you know, you'll pay them a bunch of money, and then they'll send out dodgy emails, and they'll be like, oh, do you want these free books? Well, all you have to do is give a 5-star review. And I've seen, you know, I've had those, you know, emails saying, do you want to review this? And I think there are some minefields out there. There are people who will take advantage of you. So I think it's about promoting yourself with no apologies, but also being aware of your brand, because you don't want other people to kind of look at you and think, oh, that, you know, that's a bit dodgy, are you going too far? So it is a bit of a minefield. So I think, but luckily, you know, that's why Twitter exists. There are lots of ways to find out what other people are doing and copy them and make sure you get it right, I guess.
I think it's getting that fine balance, isn't it, of being prepared for a bit of self-promotion without being too aggressive with the approach, I guess, a hard sale. And like you say, there are people out there that are looking to just con you, you know, pull the wool over your eyes a little bit.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying about podcast guesting, because I keep seeing this thing come up where a service is advertised or offered, and that you pay them and they'll get you onto podcasts. Well, that's all very good, but what if I could offer that service? I could say, oh, yeah, I can pay me something and I'll get you on podcast. And then suddenly I'm getting, say, someone that wants to talk about car mechanics onto Two Lit Chicks. Well, that's not going to work, is it?
No, exactly. I mean, the thing is, you are your best promoter.
Absolutely.
You know, and if you should do the research yourself, find out which podcasts you think are the best. And also, you don't want to just go on any podcast. You want to find ones that have, you know, a good audience.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd be a bit dubious about that. I mean, we get contacted. We started getting contacted really early on, just after we put out the first few episodes, from book PRs and also from authors themselves. And, you know, for us, it's very important that we maintain a mix of guests. So I think we try to have like 2 big names per season. We try to have a couple of debuts or people from interesting, you know, genres that we haven't used before, and then a couple of independent authors as well. So I think that it's important to have that kind of mix, you know, going forward. That's the kind of mix we're looking at. So, but we have people who have just, you know, persistently contacted us and sent us some really good pitches, and they're not big authors per se, but they've done a good job at pitching us their story. So they're definitely people that we would put on our maybe list, and yeah, maybe one day have them on the show.
Yeah, I guess it's hard, isn't it? Because I mean, I've not had to do much of this because I've only just come on recently, but you know, we do get emails from a lot of people's, you know, PR people for authors or authors themselves, and you can't have everyone on, and not everyone is right for the podcast. But I mean, I think Julie's better at this than me. Like, I have this fear of disappointing people, so I think one of the hard things is saying to people, you know, like replying to people and saying, look, we're all booked up, you know, we'd like to have you on in the future, but we're all booked up. Or then the question becomes, what if someone is definitely not right for you? You know, there's nothing wrong with that, you know, you can be honest, but like, are you going to insult them or anything? And I think it's about kind of getting into that professional mindset that you have a limited amount of time, you have a limited amount of people you can get on, you know, some aren't going to be appropriate. So it's about kind of like being nice to everyone, but also, you know, sometimes you have to say no, which I find really hard, I guess.
Yeah, but that's why, you know, we're looking at evolving how we do the podcast, because right now we have one main guest, and then we have a listener at the end of the episode who comes on and tells us a book that changed their life. But I think that, you know, moving forward, we're very interested in trying to shine a light on more people, and yeah, I mean, watch this space. It's on our radar.
Yeah, well, we're really looking forward to doing things like, you know, quick book reviews and stuff like that on social media. I mean, that's a great thing. Social, the socials allow you to do so much other stuff beyond your podcast. I mean, TikTok, I've recently joined TikTok myself. It's a whole new world that I'm learning about with various success.
Yeah, I had to take a 2-week break from it because it was just getting, oh my God, it's relentless. And I know consistency is key, but I just had to take a step back. Busy life.
Well, it is. I mean, yeah, Ed, you said about it earlier, spinning pots or spinning plates. It's that's, with social media, that's another plate to be spinning. And, it's like, I've got to make sure I'm putting a post out about this, and then I've got to make sure I've got the next guest lined up. And then you sort of look at then time management of your own life, and you're sort of thinking, well, I want to spend a bit of time on my personal stuff in life as well. It does. It's just it can become so overwhelming with so much. And I think the key is just, like we said earlier in the episode, is break it down into manageable chunks. And if you have to get help, as in, whether you've got a family member who's a bit tech savvy who can help you with editing, or you've got a friend who can maybe help you, or even if someone's recommended to you, do get it, because it could be stopping you from starting something great. We
couldn't do this podcast without you, Jeremy. Because
you could. It just wouldn't be as fun.
I could. Yeah, obviously. No, but I mean, I don't have time to edit this, and I don't have the know-how on the tech. To me, I mean, you're part of the team.
Oh.
So
I feel part of the family.
Oh. But I mean, I think that if I had to do all that, editing and stuff of the podcast as well, I think that would be the thing that put me over the edge. And I'd rather have the podcast and pay somebody else to bring their expertise to the table. It's like birthday cakes. I know that I am not a good baker, so every year I hire somebody else to make my children's birthday cake. Okay, so
work smarter, not harder. Is always my motto, because it is if suddenly trying to think about approaching guests or trying to line up guests for the next season or for going forward is a really big job anyway, because you've got to work out, you have a plan, approach the guests, work out which ones have come back to you, haven't. You've got to follow them up, get them booked in. That's a sort of a real labor intensive job doing that in itself. If suddenly you're thinking, oh God, I've got an episode that's got to be going out, and I'm supposed to contact that guest, and oh my God, I haven't done this yet, and I haven't done that, and I haven't paid the hosting fees, it suddenly just crashes. So it's just sort of making sure that everything is just spread out and go, right, okay, I can definitely do that, but that bit I'm going to have to get some help on. And there's no harm in saying that. There's no harm in saying, well, actually, because you're getting help to get something forward. You can't, a problem shared is a problem halved, isn't it?
Definitely.
Or a problem shared is often just a problem posted on Facebook afterwards by someone.
Yeah, everybody, tell me how you've had problems too, and that'll make me feel better.
Yeah, I know. But Ed, I do want to just ask you, so have you found, coming in later, and you've offered some contributions to the interview, but how has your journey been? Because it must be very strange of bolting on in the end and coming in. You've done one episode where there was 5 books. How has your experience been?
I mean, well, initially a bag of nerves. I mean, there's so many things to kind of be worried about. I mean, I was completely excited and honoured when Julia asked me, and it was an instant yes. In that, what's that film where someone says yes to everything they're asked? With Jim Carrey, maybe?
Yes, man.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Yes, based on a book. So, like, I try and take that attitude these days. Maybe me 5 years ago would have been like, oh, I'm not sure I can do that. But now I'm just like, yes, that sounds exciting. Let's do it. For better or worse, probably wouldn't say yes to skydiving or something. But I guess my first concern was, well, Jen was obviously brilliant as Julia's co-host, and all these neuroses come in. So what if what if all the listeners don't like me as much? What if I'm annoying? I have this thing which I've since discovered that everyone seems to have, where I hate my own voice. What if my voice is really annoying? So all these kind of neuroses, sort of Woody Allen style. You're not allowed to talk about Woody Allen anymore. Another famous person who has neuroses. George from Seinfeld, George Costanza. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So suddenly I become George Costanza, and I think, well, my voice is going to be annoying. People aren't going to like me. And what if I'm not suitable? I'm very much a genre man, so I do read outside of my genre, but mainly I read fantasy, crime, and horror. So what if that's not appropriate? What if I can't speak properly? What if I stutter? What if I'm very boring? What if Julia has to sort of, send me a red letter after a week, fire me, which she didn't, or it's been lost in the post, very, very bad postal service, around my way. So it's all about fighting these neuroses, basically. And after a couple of weeks, they started, the voices in my head started to shut up a bit. And to be honest, it's just been really enjoyable. So yeah, I think it's about just being a bit brave, and not kind of trying not to worry, I guess.
Yeah, and being yourself, I think, is always key. So,
and I was really impressed, when I asked Ed, he was like straight in there with a yes, and he was like, yeah, it scares the shit out of me, but I'm gonna do it. And I think that's a healthy attitude. I think that, in life, when opportunities come your way, the answer has to be yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was taught when I did a little bit of stand-up comedy quite a few years ago, and there's a course over 8 weeks, and one of the things I really took from it was just say yes more often. Because you never know how much it might change your life, and it really does. Saying yes to the right things, obviously. Hey, do you want to punch in the face? Yeah, say yes to that. But do you want to come to this with me? Yes, I'd love to. Just that sort of thing. It's making sure that you're saying yes to the right things, because it does. It just, you've only got one life at the end of the day, and we are only just simple drops in the ocean. Quite frankly, our ripples won't go far. So just
or as Hannah Gadsby calls us, the great mass extinction event that we all are. Anyway. Cheering.
That's my kind of cheeriness. Yeah.
When I read the other day, we're the only species that pays to live on this planet.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm the worst possible person you can be, because I'm a very ambitious sort of introvert. So I'm constantly wanting to say yes to stuff, because I have. I'm ambitious. I want to be an author, etc., etc. But I'm also, quite introverted. I like to, my own time. So saying yes to everything, I suddenly panic. I go, oh my god, but will that affect my, 3 days in a row playing video games I want to do? So it's about kind of sort of trying to kind of tackle your true nature, and sort of, trying to balance that extrovert side with that introvert side. There'll be lots of people listening to this going, what on earth are you talking about? But there'll be about 30% listening to this who are introverts like me, who are like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I understand. I'm an introvert extrovert.
Yes,
so
that's right. Yeah.
So I understand. I like that we're not doing filming as well. So we don't do. So it's just the sound of our voice. It's not our faces as well.
you think we're not doing filming, but Jeremy secretly got cameras.
You're looking lovely this morning, Julia.
I know you don't have a camera, but anyway.
I love doing that to people when they come into Clean Feed. They go, they're cameras, and I go, no. And the first thing I say when they come in, oh, you look lovely. What? What's that funny?
Podcasting jokes.
I can totally relate to the whole introverted extroverted thing, and I think we spend so long in life trying to work out other people, or how other situations could have gone differently if we'd have just changed it. We never take time to actually conquer ourselves. We just take so long looking for these sort of heroes or people that we think we're competing with, but we actually are in competition with ourselves. We're in competition with our own brain.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And I think by working out that you're an introverted extrovert, or that you're superstitious, or whatever it is that makes you tick, that makes you react in ways you use, it's so good to spend that time, because we learn so much more about ourselves rather than listening to others trying to tell us about ourselves.
Well, I tell my daughter, one of the best lessons I can give her is that no one else is thinking about you. Like you want to dress a certain way or behave a certain way or whatnot. But at the end of the day, people are all in their heads thinking about themselves, wondering what other people are thinking. It's just stop worrying about what other people think of you, because they're not.
I think that's one of the reasons, to be honest, like I'm enjoying my mid-30s, the most out of my adult life, because I finally, after, 15 years of worrying about what other people think of me, trying to, change my personality to suit different audiences, finally, age has, given me wisdom that, like you say, just people aren't thinking about you all the time. This idea that there's just a big island out there, people thinking about you. Everyone's on their own little weird journey. They hardly ever think about you. And some people will not, this is what I've discovered that's completely changed my life. Some people will not like you, even if you're perfectly friendly to them, even if you try not to offend them. You will either accidentally offend them or you won't at all, but for some reason they'll just take against you, and there's nothing you can do about it. No. It will never change. So you may as well just try and be, not a dick, if I can say the word dick on your podcast.
I think we've already said fucking shit.
Dick.
I think that was, I agree with you. That's a lesson I learned early on, in my early 20s. There were some girls that just didn't like me. And I was like, and I actually had to go to a psychologist about it, because I was like, and the thing that she helped me realize, and this was like one of those light bulb moments, was that I didn't like them. So who gave a fuck?
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Well, I think we've pretty much put the worlds to rights on this episode. Before we go, though, have you got any tips, any advice?
I mean, I think that what I would say is, when you are starting the podcast, set yourself a big, hairy, audacious goal for what you want to achieve with it. Mm-hmm. And then figure out what you have to do to get there. Because I think that it's like anything. If you set a goal, the chances are more likely that you'll get there than if you don't.
Brilliant. Ed, have you got a tip? Join an established podcast. That's Ed's tip.
Yeah.
Let everyone else do the hard work. Turn up halfway through. Job done.
Sit on the ground.
Have someone invite you. Just say some weird stuff. Hope you're not too annoying. Read some books. Job done. Find someone more organised than you. Like find your own Julia, and then just skirt on the back of that. That's not true. I do some stuff, listeners.
Yeah, he does. He's really putting himself out there with the TikTok videos.
That are brilliant. And we'll put a link to all your social media and everything in the show notes. But if people do want to get in touch or want to find out more, what's the best way that they should do that?
Just go to our website, twolitchicks.org, and there's a little envelope icon on the top, and you can email us through that, or just talk to us through social media.
Oh, sign up to our newsletter as well.
Yes, definitely.
I was going to say sign up to the newsletter, definitely.
Yes, sign up to the newsletter.
It's a good newsletter.
Yeah,
Thank you.
TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, lots of TikTok videos of me embarrassing myself, Julia doing normal stuff. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Julia. Thank you, Ed, so much for your time today on the Your Voice Here podcast. It's been a joy chatting to you, and I'm looking forward to season 3.
Oh, thanks for having us on.
A pleasure. Ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho, ho. Ed, it's July.
Damn.
Thank you so much to my guests for joining me today here on the Your Voice Here podcast. If you'd like to find out more information about what we discussed on today's episode, along with finding out a bit more about our guest, then check out the show notes for more details. And of course, thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. It's greatly appreciated, and it's nice to know someone's actually listening to me. If you'd like to find out more about Your Voice Here, again, check out the show notes. If you'd like to get in touch, then you can email hello@yourvoicehere.co.uk. We'd love to hear from you. Now, before every interview, I try and warm up every guest by doing a quick fire question round. It acts as a nice way to get them laughing, warming up their vocal cords, and just to relax them a little bit. Give it a try if you're a podcaster. Free tip, there you go. I did think though, what shall I do with all these quick fire question rounds that don't really make it into the podcast? Well, why not just bolt it onto the end and see if listeners like it. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to you joining me next time. Take care. Are you ready for these quick fire questions?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Nope.
Yes, there's Ed's pessimistic attitude I love so much. We're going to try and rattle through these in under a minute if we can, so let's go.
Okay.
Dog or cat?
Cat.
Dog, definitely.
Death row meal?
Pizza.
Oh, steak with peppercorn sauce, broccoli, potatoes, and some other sides.
Yeah. Keep your time going. That's what I always think. Order some sides because it's a death row meal. They can't kill you until you've eaten it. So
exactly. You can get what you want.
Yeah.
This is the perfect time.
One word that would describe you.
Oh God.
That's 3.
I don't know. That's one of those questions you kind of need to think about. Yeah. I don't know. Busy.
Strange. Easy that.
X-ray vision or ability to fly?
Fly, I think.
X-ray vision, for reasons I won't say.
And I think I have the same reasons. If you could travel back in time and do just one thing, what would it be?
Oh, am I supposed to say something like kill Hitler?
Well, no, maybe not just do one thing. Maybe if you wanted to go and see something as well. I don't want to start having like a butterfly effect. You don't want to change anything.
Yeah.
But like, if you travel back in time and wanted to see one thing, what would it be?
Oh, I think it would have been interesting to see like Henry VIII.
I would listen to a speech by Cicero, which is kind of like a bit of a sort of geeky answer, but there you go. One of the history's greatest orators. That'd be pretty cool to sit down and listen to.
Or maybe I'd go to an Elvis concert. I think that would be cool too.
That'd be amazing.
That's a more fun answer, isn't it?
I'm loving Ed's approach of, hey ladies, I'm an intellectual.
I'm strange, I'm an intellectual.
Jaffa cake or biscuit?
I don't like Jaffa cakes, so I really don't care.
I don't eat cakes or biscuits because I'm one of those awful health people, so I'm going to say neither. That's probably boring, isn't it? So, cake, let's go cake.
This is going well for a minute. The last thing you ate?
Oh, last thing I ate was, well, does drink count as well?
Technically not, because I'd say what was the last thing you drank?
Okay, you're going to be pedantic, whatever. So that was last night then. I can't remember that far back. I'm premenopausal. That's a long time for me to go back in time. So I honestly can't remember what I had for dinner.
It's the longest answer.
Ed, the last thing you ate?
That's easy. Muesli.
Nice. Favourite theme park in the world?
Ooh, Great Adventure in New Jersey.
Easy. I went there when I was 7, so I have great memories of it. Disney World in Florida. Probably changed a lot since then.
Favourite time of the year?
Summer.
Autumn, Halloween. What else is there to say?
How would you like to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as somebody who gave a shit and who tried.
Someone who occasionally said something funny.
Job done. Julia, Ed, thank you so much.
I had tacos for dinner.
Ah, there we go. Oh, lovely.
Finally.
That was brilliant. That's the outtake.
Yeah, just pull out the end.
I'm going to. I'm so glad that was recording.
Jeremy, cut it out.